So good morning. I wanted to thank you guys very much. Again, apologize for the delay, but we just ended Health and Human Services hearing, so I want to start with that one first and then talk about some of the other issues that I had brought up as part of the press announcement regarding today's meeting. We were talking about e-cigarettes and the regulations regarding e-cigarettes, both at the state and county level. One of the things that is very concerning is right now, currently, we don't have any restrictions regarding the regulation of e-cigarettes. And so this is something that the Health and Human Services Committee is now going to be taking up. We are going to look at it for the potential banning of sales of e-cigarettes to minors, as well as the usage of e-cigarettes when regarding minors, especially when it comes to within our county properties, school buildings, and public areas. We have heard from the community that have been very confused when they see an e-cigarette that's being lit in a public area as to whether or not that is legal. We've heard from a number of merchants, as well as we've heard anecdotes from particular school systems, not necessarily from Montgomery County Public Schools, but from other school systems as to their concerns. A number of school systems have indeed banned these items from their schools. I know that Montgomery County Public Schools is currently working on a policy regarding e-cigarettes, but we certainly normally as leaders when it comes to the public health safety front have been very vigilant when it comes to protecting our minors. And so from that perspective, I do see us doing something rather quickly when it comes to making sure that from a minor perspective that we certainly keep these devices, which are nicotine or addictive drug delivery systems, out of the hands of our minors, and making sure that we certainly reduce the impact or the potential impact that could come from secondhand vapor or aerosol that's being emitted from these devices as the person blows out the smoke. There are a number of studies that are going on currently as we speak with NIH and NIDA, and so we will be using that to help guide us, but there are already some preliminary studies that have already been done. There are a number of jurisdictions that have also banned these items, including or placed regulations or restrictions on these items, including very big, well-known cities like New York, and Chicago and the like, and so I think that we certainly will somehow follow suit. So more details to come, but we do have staff that will be drafting pending legislation, so that's something we will be working at over the summer. On another Health and Human Services front, I am the council's appointed member to our Health and Human Services Human Trafficking Task Force, and so with that, I did hold a Washington Metropolitan Regional Council Chairs meeting regarding our human trafficking challenges that we face in the region. I wanted to do that before we met as a task force for Montgomery County to be able to share some of the ideas, some of the things that other jurisdictions have been able to do regarding combating human trafficking and some of the recommendations that they have for us here in Montgomery County, but also, more importantly, a concerted, combined effort between all of us to really define this region as an area in which we want to stave off the proliferation of human trafficking that takes many forms. Many people oftentimes just see it as the prostitution angle, but we also have domestic workers that do get caught up in these human trafficking cases as well. And so it's very important for us to make sure that we're protecting the rights of not just the children that are involved, but also the adults that unfortunately get caught up in this very negative trade. And some of the recent area cases that you might have seen, Spa World in Manassas, Virginia, just got investigated for their role when it came to not only which is a very, very large spa, which is why I bring it up. They even advertise on Groupon. They actually are being investigated for a number of human rights violations, including mandating that people sleep on floors in the back, paying them well below the wages, not paying them at all, and also prostitution. And so with that in mind, what we're looking to do is to make sure that we in this region, in the Washington metropolitan region, can certainly do all we can to stave off these. I'll highlight a number of things that we learned. Acupressure, neuro massage, reflexology, these are all the new names that these businesses are operating under to avoid regulation by both the county and the state. And so this is a challenge that we are looking at statewide. It's certainly something that I will be bringing up at the MACO conference in August to make sure all jurisdictions are aware of what we're trying to do throughout the state of Maryland. But we as a region left that Washington Metropolitan Regional Council Chairs meeting committed to making sure that we are working together to share both policies as well as any potential legal changes when it comes to the law to make sure that we are addressing these particular avenues of crime. I can tell you that we will be talking to our state delegation about potential state legislation that does give us the authority to start defining some of these other areas, and we'll also be looking at ways in which we can chime in when it comes to our federal delegation and the regulation of the internet. As many of you know, Craigslist was one of the ones that had their site shut down. I did hear from law enforcement when it comes to their advertising for adult services. When I talked to law enforcement, they did say that one of the things that they do use is the internet to actually seek out and prosecute some of these folks and use it to enact stings. So we're really not sure as to how much of a good versus in terms of us being able to investigate having these things on the internet and accessible versus pushing them further into the darkness is going to be better for us. And so certainly that's something that we will work very closely with our law enforcement officials to decide on how best to move forward. But I can't tell you that this is certainly one of our highest priorities. When I then went to the Human Rights Task Force and briefed them on what I found, some of the comments and concerns dealt with the promotion of services for those that are caught up in the human trafficking. There was the proposal for a safe house for those folks that are involved in human trafficking as well. That will be something that I talk with the county executive that may be a potential for us in next year's budget to start to arrange. Many of you know that we already have created a safe haven place for victims of domestic violence through the Sheriff's Department, and that has worked extremely well. There had been a question about whether or not we could combine the two, and that was refuted. That would be a safety issue, but I think it's certainly something in which we need to look at when it comes to creating a place. One of the things that folks commented on is what happens when these victims are rescued from their situation, but then where do they go with no family? Oftentimes are brought from other countries or other areas of this country, and so have no family ties. And so what happens for the year or 2 years that this case is being prosecuted, and how that will then help those individuals. And so from that perspective, there's a lot that we need to do. We need to make sure that a public awareness campaign goes out so that folks are aware of what's going on in their community so they can be vigilant as well. One of the things that educated me certainly was that our law enforcement said anytime you drive by and you see it, you might see it say acupressure or reflexology, but then right outside of that they have a little sandwich board that says $49 massage. You can almost 90% guarantee that there's something illegal that's going on in that facility. And so I heard from our Health and Human Services Enforcement as well, who regulates some of these venues, and they are looking to the county to really step up and give them more in their arsenals so that they can combat some of these places that are currently existing in our region. And so there's more to come, but there will be certainly, I think, before the end of the year, pending legislation both at the state level and at the county level to address what we're seeing in terms of the rise of human trafficking. I want to thank the county executive for his role in creating this human trafficking task force. I want to thank the director of our human rights, James Stowe, for their commitment, as well as the support of Health and Human Services and Department of Permitting Services as well, who are all engaged, along with our police department and our various other community stakeholders, Women's Commission, et cetera, that are all very concerned about this issue and really want to make sure that we can get something done to start to address this problem. So with that, I'll turn it over to questions.
No, you can. Back to the e-cigarettes. So, how closely are you working with the school board? Are you going to have your own tracks, or are you working together on
No, my hope is that we can do this together. I know that with the school system themselves, they will probably enact their own individualized policy. We are probably going to look to do something that's a little bit more stringent. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do, but when it comes to the prohibition of utilizing these types of devices in public places, as well as, which would include, obviously, any school property. So from that perspective, I think the school board certainly needs to be very strong in terms of their statement, but we will be equally strong as a county as well in terms of just making sure that we're keeping these out of the hands of minors. What we heard today as a part of this committee work session or committee briefing is that when it comes to the addiction qualities, that children are most at risk. That's the reason why oftentimes the cigarette companies marketed to children. You had the Joe Camels and all of those back in the day because they knew the children's receptors were much more open to that nicotine addiction. And so therefore, from that perspective, with e-cigarettes, it's the same thing. It's a nicotine delivery device. And so therefore, they become addicted to these delivery devices. And so that's still just not something that we want to expose our children to. And so we will be looking to make sure that we try and reduce all avenues of exposure.
So have you heard anything about the governor and then the federal government looking to move the illegal children that are being held in borders to various places in the D.C. region, including the site in Montgomery County, PG County, in Baltimore? Have you heard anything about that?
I mean, just media reports. I haven't had any conversations with anyone. No one has briefed us in terms of they're looking at potential sites. That's not to say that isn't happening. I know that the governor had expressed, again, via media reports, that he was open to considering a place in which they might be able to help the federal government when it comes to housing some of the undocumented children that have come into the United States. But as of current, we haven't heard of any particular sites or had anything that was highlighted for Montgomery County. I just heard about the one that was rejected that originally was being considered, which I think was Westminster.
So how would you feel if the governor were to bring the children to a site in Montgomery County?
Well, I think there's a lot of logistical concerns that go along with that. Ultimately, we are about making sure that we are humanitarian in our efforts to protect children. So I think that from that standpoint, we always want to try and make sure that we can help in humanitarian efforts, whether that's here in this country or abroad. When it comes to the details of what a facility might look like and what it might do, those are so far ahead of where we are at this point. That would be something that we'd certainly have to take a look at and really understand. There are security aspects that go along with it as well. I'd be very concerned knowing that and seeing the reactions of some of the folks down in Texas that reacted very strongly and negatively towards these children being brought into the community. I would be concerned about their safety, and so I think that there are a lot of logistical safety concerns that have to be addressed as well. So you'd have to pick a site that would be able to do something like that. So there's a lot of things that go into this. I'm not sure if there's a lot of property that would meet the needs of what a facility like that would be here in Montgomery County. But again, I'm just not sure because that's, I'm thinking 15 steps ahead, and we haven't even really gotten to the point where anyone has said that that's what they're looking for here in Montgomery.
So if it were to happen, how involved would you guys like to be in the process? Because it seems in other communities where the children have been moved, the local community hasn't really been that involved. It's just been like the federal's like, oh, hey, here's the children, here's the site. So how involved would you like to be if that were to happen?
Well, my hope is that we have a very strong relationship with our governor and with our state agencies, DHMH and others. So my hope is that we would be involved, consulted again when it comes to the security aspects and the need to provide services for these children as well. Those are ultimately going to come from local jurisdictions. I very much doubt that the state would do something like that in terms of also providing the services. They don't really have the capacity to do so. And so from that perspective, I think that the locals would have an integral role when it came to enacting something like that. But again, at this point, we're just speaking out of speculation. But, it's certainly something that if it were to happen, I know that would be something that we would like to have and play a role in.
Silver Line's come on. Do you have any update, or what's your perspective in waiting for your Silver Spring Transit Center?
So I think that we have an update that will be later on in the fall when we get back from recess. We're about to go on recess at the end of July. So I think we have an update that will be scheduled right when we return in September. I can tell you that from my initial conversations with folks that things seem to be running as planned. Again, this is a little bit of a longer process because it does involve us doing a more invasive procedure when it comes to correcting some of the damage to the Silver Spring Transit Center. And so from that perspective, I haven't heard anything in terms of us changing the time frame. That would be next year when we have a Silver Spring Transit Center that is then ready for Metro to do its final inspection process on. So our hope is that just like this Silver Line project took a myriad of years to open phase one, and there are multiple phases that will carry on for the next 5 or 6 years, I think. This is one in which we certainly want to make sure that we get it right and make sure that it's safe for our constituents. And so we don't want to rush that. We want to make sure we're dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's. We've already seen what happens when that doesn't happen from our contractors. So we want to make sure we're doing it as a county.
Are you worried at all that the inspection process is going to take a long time? I know that it took a long time for the Silver Spring, for the Silver Line. Are you concerned that inspection process, once you hand that over, is going to also delay things?
I am, but at the same time, at this point, we're already in the midst of delays, and so I don't think that we should rush anything along to just to make it faster. I think that, again, the more caution, the better. When you already know that you have something that started off with some challenges and concerns, and so therefore we don't want to take a rushed approach. We certainly want to make sure that we're sure that this facility is safe, and then it addresses the needs that Metro has for its capacity. And once that's done, then, we'll open it to the public.
Have you had any concerns with Mr. Sarbanes as far as having his name attached to this center?
I haven't heard anything like that. So no, I think that, if I were to put myself in that kind of situation, I think that once the building opened or the facility opened and you knew that it was going to be a great facility, then that would be okay. And that's ultimately what matters at the end of the day, is that you've got a facility that will be a shining beacon for things and the future of Silver Spring as a transit hub, as a place where We see a lot of folks using mass transit, and so I think that that's the reason why this facility was named after him, and why he'd be proud to have this facility named after him. And so, from that perspective, I think the ultimate end game is really what matters most. All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. And more to come on both e-cigarettes and human trafficking. So this will be something we'll be reporting on at the next meeting as we get more updates. All right? Thank you.